We'll go on to old business then. Item A is early childhood education. Dr. Zales will update the board about the early childhood education planning process.
We'll go to a few places on the presentation that's been before you and before all the internal staff, and certainly in front of the people that are in the audience here, including someone who's coming to see me, Mr. Hohenfeld, at some point in time, right? All right, looking forward to that. Take you to some places where changes have been made related to the next item on the agenda. Relative to the CSIP. We've been looking at those items that were below 3.80 on the Patron Insight survey, even though those aren't appreciably lower than 3.80 by definition from Mr. DeSeagart. The CSIP process that we kicked off last week, the 26th of February, certainly is involving citizens in the decision-making processes, particularly as the school district moves forward. And certainly from that last process that occurred, early childhood education was a focus that came from that group. So we're excited about that, but I wanted to make sure we kind of call attention to our ongoing and future strategic planning. Another area, too, this is actually a representative from Maryland, former governor from Maryland. The kindergarten teachers put together a trifold brochure that's going out to the kindergarten parents at screening next month in April. And Mr. Fridley, Mr. Hounsome, and the kindergarten teachers at Mark Twain and beyond helped put that trifold together that I've made available to anybody that we do presentations to. So that's recently been developed, and that information is also embedded in this presentation now that appears on the website. So pretty profound statement, but nothing that's new to this board, or certainly anybody that's worked in early childhood education, knowing about the development of the young person's brain genetically and how early interventions, the earlier the better.
Dr. Salas, back to the very first slide. I think, on that one, like, just to reiterate that anything above the 3.8 mark was considered.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Above 3.8, because I've heard a differing opinion.
This is a cross-tabulation 5-point scale, so 0 to 5, and impossible to get a 5 unless you were everybody that you called out of the 375 registered voters, equally above and below I-44 and east and west of 63. That's the sample. Plus, we had another 300 online surveys that were complete. So in total, quite a sample. But with the phone surveys, anything in bold is something that became a hot button issue for the person that was called. In other words, they freely offered additional comments relative to those areas without being prompted. So anything in bold here was important to them, and anything above a 3.80 is considered great. You can't get a 5 unless everybody gives a 5. So it's 0 to 5 on the rating. And we had good marks the last time we did this in 2009. So yes, anything below 3.80 gets our attention, and we're working as an administrative team and with you to make sure that we're going to get better at those things. No one ever said that, at least that we work with, that we're perfect. We're moving forward in a lot of areas, and this one's a tangible one that's going on and kicked off last week. So good question.
Thank you.
It was on the website, DESE's website today, and if you specifically clicked on DESE's website, the top address on this slide, go to the spot that says Now for Later. In other words, investment now for return on investment later. It's rich with a lot of information and research based on early childhood education. So I haven't really called that out specifically, but I think anybody that goes on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website and clicks on the Now for Later tag will find a lot of good information there. Also, our discussions, and it's also embedded in that brochure, what do kindergartners need to know now as compared to back then? And what is back then? Well, back then is not the beginning of kindergarten. beginning of time, as we remember kindergarten ourselves, but within the last few years. In other words, we started all-day kindergarten in 2002 in this district, and I've certainly taken us back to 1996 on this presentation with some discussion about moving from half-day to full-day. So on the brochure, and I think it's important to know, what do kindergartners need to know? The nine key skills are there. I'm not going to read those to you or to anybody that might be watching this presentation, but those are fundamentals that all preschools and all people involved with early learning education, these are the things that students should come to kindergarten ready to do. And as you look at kindergarten then and now, you see back during that time period 10 years ago or so, or greater, we were at half day, we're now full day. And what happens subtly to what students are doing now? They're still learning through play, still learning to get along. I wouldn't want anybody to think that kids aren't able to be kids in a pre-K environment. They're learning through play. But they're also increasing some of the math and some of the other learning skills that you see, particularly with reading, to allow kids to be ready to read early, as early as possible. When you look at English and language arts, during that same time frame, you just look at the comparison between what we're asking kids to do now as compared to then. And the nice thing about this is that kids are capable. They'll rise to the occasion. They're doing amazing things in kindergarten classrooms now. So I wouldn't call it too rigorous for them. We just need to make sure that all kids have that opportunity to make those kinds of profound gains during their first year. With regard to mathematics, I won't read that to you again. You can kind of see the changes that have occurred. So not only what are they going to need to know, but how has it changed over time?
I don't think I knew what a vertice was.
Yep. And so also I would remind folks that our planning for early childhood has not been just a recent phenomenon. We've been talking about it for a long time, so I did embed the question in here. How long has all the schools been talking about it? Well, again, since '96, our first discussions about moving to all-day kindergarten. In here, too, with the long-range plan, this was part of our last CSIP process, the long-range facility plan, which is a 10-year plan. And I think as we start to look at options before us, it was important. I just took this slide and actually redarkened the first, the third, and the fourth bullet points, because we can't forget those. They're involved in our planning as well. The only ones I had originally extracted here in larger print and in maroon were the ones relative to early childhood. But you can still see the auditorium, performing arts center. That remains on there since 2007, and that committee had 50 people on it, or excuse me, 20 to 30 people on it that were charged with coming up with a plan for our facilities for 10 years from 2007. I won't review our numbers. I did update, we invited Manual Lutheran to our latest meeting. We had a preschool provider meeting, the faith-based group. And I would remind anybody that's watching this, and I did remind the faith-based group, if there are other people that would benefit from being around the table with us talking about upping the opportunities for early childhood education, we certainly would invite them to the table. We had a good meeting on Tuesday with this group, and Emmanuel Lutheran has 13 4-year-olds now, and they have no waiting list. They certainly would like to grow. Again, 50% of our 360 kindergartners have not been involved in formal pre-K programming. We'll really know more about that next month, as one of the questions we'll ask at kindergarten screening to a greater degree than we've ever asked before is how many, if that student has indeed had an opportunity in early childhood. That'll be good for us to glean information from. Of course, we've been on the field trips. We talked about the two options. Did remind the group yesterday that we haven't, and I would remind anybody watching, and would certainly remind anybody in the audience here, that we have not landed on any decision relative to standalone facility or repurposing district facilities, and that's where we are today. I think there was some misconception that we were offering early childhood programming at the beginning of school in August of 2014, which is impossible. Unless we were going to bring modular, I don't even know if we could bring modulars back in enough time to start it next year. And I will not be a part of, well, I guess I would if you told me to. But, we promised that we wouldn't bring modular classrooms back. And so the plan is still in its input stages. We have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of information to share with the CSIP committee as well. That's just getting started. So the standalone facility and its projected costs are still out there. We did refine the bullet points, and I have refined them on the survey. Once we're done, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but once we get out in the public with the survey, it needs to align with what we've been talking about here. And we just finished the internal surveying part. The reconfiguration, we finished talking with all of our district staff members. We've been to all 7 buildings. And just recently received that information, and Nancy has collated all of that and sent it out to the board. We've shared it with the building level administrators, and now we're in the process of sharing it with the entire staff, teaching staff first, and then we'll put that out for everyone to see. The standalone facility here, or excuse me, the repurposing of the facility does have the auditorium in it, because the auditorium, if you remember the bullet points from 2007, it's a way to try to address those things that previous committees have told us we need to address. And facilities are important. It was funny, Keith mentioned his daughter in an education program, and mine is too. It's funny to listen to your own kids go out in other districts. Mine's in a 3rd grade classroom, and saying, man, the buildings aren't as nice as ours. You know, so that's good to hear, and I think kids deserve to be in nice buildings. And I think teachers, when you're looking at recruiting good teachers who teach our kids, it says a lot about your home, how you keep it.
Exactly right.
It says a lot about the value that you place on the educational environment by how clean and how much it's kept in good working order. And that's what that committee told us back then. Take care of your existing facilities. So that's why this is in this particular scenario. So again, there was a question asked to me after one presentation. Well, Dr. Salas, I don't want the freshmen over at the high school. I don't think my daughter needs to be over there with all those older kids. But we certainly saw how it worked in Branson with the 9th grade wing. Waynesville just opened theirs up too. But we already have 153 of our 344 9th graders that are bused over from the junior high to the high school, 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th hours. So it's not like the 9th graders haven't been going to the high school, and the older kids have not seen freshmen at the high school in the past. So I'm sure Sophie would attest to freshmen they don't walk around with a little tag on that says I'm a freshman. They're a all bulldog just like the rest of them. And
At Branson, they
They
actually
did.
Remember? They all had name tags.
That's right, they did.
Well, each grade had them, though.
Well, and they tried to keep them separate. I mean,
Separate.
they're-
And by the very nature of the design, they would be in a large part. But, there would be classes they would interact just like
That was more for ID more than it was to say who was who. I think,
Well,
or-
Dr. Salas, one thing I'd like to add when you said that this early childhood just isn't something that's come up. I know I've been on the board for 5 years now. For 5 years at the October conference, I've been attending meetings, watching, what other districts are doing with early childhood. And so we've been thinking about this.
Run into the curve by any stretch.
Dr. Zales, the slide prior to, when you've got 153 freshmen transporting to 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th hours, yeah, we don't need a breakdown, but just imagine, there's a pretty good part of their hour lost in getting them out, loading them in a bus, driving them across town, getting them out, getting them to class. We could really use that time better served in a classroom.
Well, there's 20 kids. If you had 173 kids or 173 spots, I should say. 'Cause
Right.
20 of those kids take.
Or
more
doing
than
2 of
one.
them.
Yeah, they're going to band and then maybe back for
Correct. So
foreign
they're there
language or
they're not
something.
losing as much instructional time.
Sure.
But yeah, it's time to load a bus and get them back, and we're dealing with that as we shuttle between elementary schools because of crowding sometimes too, trying to minimize that for every student that was riding a shuttle from one part of the district to the other. yeah, I don't know what that amount of time is from junior high
Right.
to high school.
But you're losing something.
Just remind you, too, that the staffing that's there is for 10 or 11 teachers, 11 aides, and everything that goes into the need for an early childhood center. Those are all projections based just to get this discussion off dead center into the community, understanding these things cost money, but at the end of the day, there'll be a lot of refinement and a lot of input that we'll gather between now and a year from now when we hope to be out in front of the voters. So not August of 2014. What it costs, what a levy would do, 15 cents and 15 cents, even the need for that is still something that we're discussing. And it is true that 15 cents in construction bonds generates 10 million. We would replicate our previous two issues where we'd supplement out of capital projects funds we've been banking money in order to make these things happen without placing the burden entirely on the taxpayer. And it is true that 600,000 is less than half of 1.3 million, but whether or not we need 11 teachers is still there. And we constantly repurpose budget dollars to make things happen. As I've illustrated in this presentation before, our levy hasn't been touched in 13 years, and we're still doing things that keep us moving ahead. And so our mindset has always been not to march out there too far. But we think we're very comfortable in where our balances are. We're somewhat comfortable in the deficit spending mode as long as we have a plan when that's going to stop, which we do. And that the only purpose for fund balances is to bridge gaps between economic uncertainties and more certain times, which I'm still longing for, but yet we still keep navigating through legislative sessions that present challenges to us, and this one's no different. Again, our levy, where it sits and where it would go to at 30 cents, we would propose to phase it in over 3 years if it were being done today. So it's $20 in the first year for a residence average and $102 for a business, but whether or not that is where it lands, proof of that is when we did the last levy increase, we never needed the entire 80 cents to make happen what we promised to make happen. This slide's rather busy with words and letters, but I think the most important thing, you heard Brent Gann talking during the legislative update from the Missouri School Boards Association, the governor's proposed budget, and what it means to us with $278 million running through the formula is $1.39 million, and it is more than what we projected the cost of the Early Learning Center or pre-K programming to cost. However, and it potentially impacts the need for the 15 cents because we would repurpose dollars again and bridge that gap where deficit spending by 1.5 million projected to, but that the reality is we may not fall at that point either. But there's other CSIP related priorities that we're going to learn as we get into the spring into May when that school improvement plan is complete by our citizens group. So the House's response to that rather shortly after, and it's come up some even this week because of the House representative, the House budget, how do I want to call him? Representative
chairman.
Stream,
Yeah.
his proposed budget, the tiered process, which we've not seen before, but it's interesting and we like it because if we can get to 278 and 1.39 for Rolla, that's better than where we've been. So we haven't planned a budget on either one of those scenarios, the 508 or the 1.39. We've never done that. We've taken a conservative guess at what we'll get in the formula, and that's proven to be good for us as we've moved on since 2008 during the economic downturn. So I would, we wouldn't do anything different. So all I've asked people to do as we conclude the presentation we had with the preschool providers yesterday is we're really just trying to narrow the options. With our internal staff surveys, that information is pretty interesting to look at. The scenario 2 is the one that they like the best, but what is more valuable, I know if you had a chance to look at it, are the comments. I don't think, except for one that I remember that says do what you want to because you're going to anyway. I see that on every time we ask for input on anything. They just think we're going to do what we want to do like it's my plan. That without fail in there's our internal staff recognizes the need for that, whether they're a high school teacher or a middle school teacher. Timeline, to reiterate and put fears aside, that we're not opening anything in August of 2014. From this point now, working on a survey for our community, we were talking yesterday about embedding it in our website, and there has to be a screencast, meaning that my voice or the presentation, shortened version of this presentation, followed by an opportunity for a citizen to take the survey based upon hearing what all these things mean, and they're not just bullet points on slides, I think it makes it easier to understand. Because it's a 4-page survey with 2 questions, but there's a lot of stuff there. So we're working on that. We'll kind of get that going here after a month or so. But now until August of 2017, if we were successful in April of 2015, we're a year in design and construction with doors opening to a facility in August of 2017. It seems like a long way off, and it is when you look at just numbers and months, but it's not next year. It needs to be next year, but it's not. So from now until then, there's a lot of information that we want to learn from the various community members, parents, patrons, anybody that will allow us to talk about raising the awareness of the need for early childhood. And I've asked folks to just think beyond themselves. I don't drive on every street in Rolla, but I like all of our streets to be nice. I don't use everything. I really think we need the best police force in the country, and I think we need the best fire. I may never use them, but by golly, I'm fine to help support that. And the parks need to be nice, and our schools need to be great. And so it's all about what we do to raise the awareness and what we do to make our community a better place to be. So we don't have all the program details ironed out. Matter of fact, yesterday I was talking with our preschool providers. There's a lot we've pulled back from, particularly with before and after school care. And if you think about the 17 classrooms that we need for kindergarten, plus 10 classrooms that are built into both scenarios, because the square footage of Mark Twain, for example, and a standalone early childhood center are about the same, 50,000 square feet. And you take 10 classrooms and you back out for pre-K, 4-year-olds, and then you back out of that early childhood special education and PAT and the other things that we would want to create in a comprehensive center. We're not, we hope to get to that 50% serving, particularly the title kids, the kids who need the all-day programming the most, who aren't currently in any program now. And we can identify those through our screening, through PAT, and certainly through Head Start. So be happy to answer any questions, but those are the changes to the presentation. And I'll go anywhere and talk about it with anybody that will have us.
So title is different than need-based.
Title is based on academic performance and a specific test to identify who those students are.
Jim, our title funds are driven by poverty levels in the community. So there is a tie between title and poverty, but only in the amount of funding we have. The services themselves that we offer in the school district in our buildings now are performance-based, and there's no poverty relationship to the kids who are served. It's all performance-based. So there is a tie between poverty and Title I, but only on the overall funding that we have access to.
But for me to go out and say that we're looking to serve the kids that are need-based is not correct. If we go to a title type of
No, that's
a
correct.
Academically need.
academic need,
Right.
well, you're equating though economic and need, and because those are the kids that aren't getting the opportunities to go to
There's
early
overlap.
childhood. There's overlap, so.
Someone who qualified academically would not be excluded because their parents make
Too much
high
money.
income.
Right.
If they're academically, they would qualify for title. If they, so is that answering
But they
the question?
wouldn't qualify for Head Start.
Right.
If they-
Right.
They would not qualify for
So
Head
there's,
Start.
there's two different programs that serve two different groups of kiddos.
So we're talking about kids that are behind
Academically.
academically that we would serve first. Then if there was space, we would consider serving by
Need-based?
whatever system,
Probably.
people that would like to send their students, their children to that type of setting for a fee.
Well, it's just so important that, and your slide points it out very well, almost exactly half of the 4-year-olds in our community either don't have access or for some reason are not accessing any sort of educational opportunities. And this would open that door wide open where we're not going to be competing with the facilities that are already in business because they're not looking for the same child. We're looking for children who would need special academic help.
Yeah, there are nuances in there that we're learning all the time, particularly from Head Start and from the partnership about those that qualify for. They don't qualify. They're graduate students who they don't make the money, but they make too much money to qualify for services
Right.
at Head Start, but they don't make enough to pay for one of the programs that are there. So, and there's got to be a way to have a program that gives everyone the opportunity in that 50%. That's absolutely correct.
Well, I think it'd be exciting to see how fast kindergarten and first grade can advance when 90 to 100% of those kids have been reached out to as 4-year-olds and had work in a classroom, and they've got to mature through that, and they've had hands-on experiences. I think the results of what we see in first, second, third, fourth is going to quickly improve.
Well, our data, this community's always been bimodal, and performance, socioeconomics is just kind of the way it is. And right now, we've got a lot of them, the haves that understand the value of education and can do that, and we have a lot that don't, and not a lot in between. So that 50% is, it does trail.
I was surprised the other day. I was at a meeting sitting with a longtime Head Start employee, and I was talking with her a little bit about this, and she said, and I can only take her word for it, but she said that a 2-parent family with 1 child that are each making minimum wage in their jobs make too much for that child to qualify for Head Start.
Yeah.
And theirs
Really surprised me.
were sliding scale fees. The advent of those have come, so they pay what they can afford based upon a number of students in their economic bracket, and that we haven't flushed that out yet, but that's why that stays there, because we ought to consider that if that child needs to come to school.
Right,
somewhere.
right.
And there are other districts doing it and successful with it, so we're not blazing a new trail with a sliding scale.
Right.